Hey everyone, welcome back to part 3 in our ongoing series where we try to solve the question of why won't my 2005 Honda CR-V's front end stop vibrating? Now if you're just joining us for this series, we've already done 2 other things after obviously getting the tires rotated and balanced. We took a look at the compliance bushings on the front control arms, found those were going out again and changed them, and then we got into a ball joint and dealt with that. Today on part 3, we are now looking at engine and transmission mounts. These do go bad eventually in some cases and can be another reason why your vehicle won't stop shaking about the front end. So let's get outside into the driveway and see what's going on. Passenger vehicles use at least 3 primary mounts to support the drivetrain weight and control motion. On this CR-V, there's a 4th auxiliary mount as well, but the one that caught our attention was the upper transmission mount. While performing other troubleshooting work, we had noticed the engine moving around a lot. So I'm now getting on the highway. A test drive with a GoPro under the hood further confirmed our suspicions. Now, it should be obvious that this mount is tenderized, but equally to the point, the engine mounts function as a system. This mount was just replaced around 30,000 miles ago, so we probably have more than one thing going on here. Let's start by getting this one figured out. Replacement of the transmission mount on this vehicle is relatively easy. You're going to need a selection of basic hand tools for the most part. When you get to the step where you're actually ready to remove the mount, you will need a floor jack in order to provide some support underneath the transmission pan to actually loosen that and remove the assembly. Otherwise, first step is going to be removing the top of the airbox, just like we were going to change the air filter. For that, I happen to have a pipe clamp here. I've got a traditional OE style clamp here that removes these 2 hoses, and then this is going to come up after removing the 5 screws that hold it down. These have a Phillips head on them, but if you can, I would strongly recommend using an 8mm hex socket. Okay, now if all the screws are fully loose, that will just lift off. Notice that there are no other pipes or sensors connected to this piece, so away it goes. Next, we remove the air filter. Now this airbox has to come off. This here is a screw, that there's a screw, and that there is a nut, but it looks like they all have the same size head. That head is a 10. Has a washer attached to it. This one here. This one here is a nut. I believe the washer on there might be captive in the box. If not, it'll fall off and we'll have to get it later. And then third, we have this one here. That one there is extra long. So the extra long one is going to go back in here. It has to because there's a deep well for that to drop down into. The short one came out of the corner here. The nut came out over here and there's a stud sticking up. It's a little tricky to see, but this airbox has a push-on hose here that goes to the cold air intake at the front of the engine, which happens to be bolted on right about there. I'd prefer not to remove this if I don't have to. So I'm going to try and slip the hose off of here. And then if I have trouble getting it back in, which I think I've had in the past, then I'll come back up front and remove the horn or trumpet or whatever you want to call that thing up there. There we go. Work the airbox up and out. You never know what you're going to find in the bottom of one of these. Dead something. Okay, with all that interfering material out of the way, you should now find that you have excellent access to this mount. This is the stage where you do have to introduce a floor jack. We are not lifting the vehicle, however. We're just going to very slightly lift the transmission and transfer case here from the bottom to take the tension off of that mount. Now, there's no real good spot to do this that I know of. Just make sure you're not about to crush anything fragile or which has sensors. This area right here where we have these multiple ribbings to bind the case together is probably as good a spot as any. So if I can look closer to here, we should be in better shape. Okay, so there we are, closer to the front. Let's give that a shot. Okay, we've taken some of the strain off of this. All 6 of these bolts are 17s as well as the 7th cross bolt. And to take these off, here, these 2 back here, you're going to need an extension. This one you won't. This one you won't. But then these 2 here, you will need a long socket. Not sure how much torque is going to be on these, but we'll find out. Let's see if this guy can do it. And There we go. I don't think it was actually in that tight. I think the steel just galled into the cast aluminum a bit, as they tend to do. Yeah, I don't think that's coming all the way out, so I am going to have to remove all 6 bolts. Okay, let's try the I wasn't asking bar. There we go. Well, there it is, out of the vehicle and looking thoroughly tenderized. I mean, the fact that I can just wiggle it around so freely with my thumb, see all the cracks and gouges in the rubber, and in fact, if we look closely under there, there's starting to be a brake line form all the way around the corner there, and then coming to the backside as well, there's some signs of it breaking through in there as well. So, the only question is it well and truly shot because it just wore out naturally, or is something else in the engine also going that's allowing it to move too much? Don't know for sure yet, but either way, this has got to be swapped. Oh, there he is, but we got a trick for you. Old trick for getting bolts down in tight spots, just use a little piece of masking tape that'll tear away as soon as you start getting it threaded in. In the wild, steel hardware and aluminum castings are known to mate for life, so to facilitate future maintenance, don't forget the anti-seize compound. We're not frosting a cake here, but a small dab will facilitate installation without galling the threads and protect the connection from galvanic corrosion. Also, don't forget to install the main cross bolt between the transmission bracket and the new mount before reinstalling the assembly in the bay. We did this off camera in the workshop bench vise. Happy with all those. It looks like all 3 of these are going to go in no problems. And of course, don't forget to retorque the bolts that you removed as they go back into place. 7 bolts or nuts were removed to get at this mount, so 7 need to be reinstalled and torqued before we reinstall the airbox above it. Remember that these are drivetrain mounts and subject to vibration, but at the same time, some of these bolts are being torqued into aluminum, so if you have any doubts about how tight they should be, look up the factory spec and use a torque wrench. Okay, just rev it right now. Since this vehicle has no sensors mounted in the airbox, we can do brief test runs while it's still out and observe the movement. Of course, we want to be sure nothing interesting is accidentally sucked into that big hose at lower left. Because we have the vehicle in drive but the brakes applied, we can watch the hydraulic differential speed pump in the transfer case attempt to turn the rear drive shaft. It's also worth noting that this is a worst case scenario for engine movement in the bay. In any case, there's still plenty of motion going on here, and since the transmission mount has torn out twice in a short time, we're suspecting this lower rear mount is also going bad. Thank you. Okay, the airbox is now ready to go back in, although I have a hunch from experience that this might be a pill to get on. Let's find out. Actually, that wasn't so bad. Okay, so now in reverse order, we have our long bolt going down in here. Shorter bolt going back in there, and a nut threading back onto that stud. Reinstall the air filter, reinstall the filter box, Previously, we pointed to the lower rear mount as another potential failure point. It's located down here, and you should be able to get at it by removing the crossbolt and 3 bottom bolts from beneath the engine subframe. The cast aluminum bracket can remain attached to the transfer case. We had a shop do this one while the vehicle was in for other reasons, but it's all accessible. The crossbolt is another 17. But just to keep your sockets busy, the bottom 3 are 14s. As you can see from these images we took before the replacement, this one was also getting tenderized and was close to developing a tear out. We've now found and replaced 2 bad mounts. What are the odds the other 2 are in great shape? Let's continue to the front unit and see what it looks like. For this front drivetrain mount, you can actually see it just looking up in this weep hole right here. We won't actually need to be under the vehicle to do this work, so I'm going to try cheating. I'm not lifting the vehicle off the ground, I'm just raising it a couple 3 inches so I can get better access to everything under here. But I should be able to do this without getting under the vehicle itself. What I do need to do though is hit a whole bunch of these plastic clips, because I got to get this splash shield out of the way and there's no other way to do it. One thing that can help you avoid destroying too many plastic pieces is to make sure you use plastic tools to remove things. Now unfortunately, a full removal of this panel requires pulling more clips back up inside the wheel well. I'm trying to avoid doing that just so I don't have to get the wheels off the ground in order to access all those clips. But let's see here. Not a lot of great ways to film this, but basically just straight back in here is a bolt. Right here above it is a bolt. You can just kind of see the edge of it right up there. And then this bolt nut right here feeds through. Hey Gracie, you going for a walk? Yeah, good dog going for a walk. Let's figure out what the bolt size is down there. These are once again 17s. So let's see if I can get enough of a bar in there to break torque on that. Oh, that's always a fun noise. Okay, it's actually an easier spot to hold it under here, maybe with a wrench. And I'm not feeling any tension on that bolt, so I don't think the engine is actually resting on that mount, which means I don't have to jack up the transfer case again. Okay, there's the bolt. Came off with a stop tab that I'm going to need to bend back down a bit. And there's the bolt itself, no washer on it. And now we should be able to get to that one pretty straightforward. Okay, we're back to using a extension, I think. Okay, too long, too short. What would be just right? Well, hello again. No, those don't taste good. Those don't taste good at all. This is the hardware of a ratcheting wrench, but it has a 1/4 inch and a 3/8. This might be the killer app for it if it fits. Oh, hot dog, I think it will. There we go. By now, you should be getting the idea that this one is just awkward to reach. It might help to remove the battery and battery tray and go at it from above. Second one. And both of these are identical. The question is, how do we work this out? But eventually we got all bolts loose and fished it out after using nearly every extension and converter piece in the drawer. It is ripped up, torn, done. This is not a wasted job, it needed to happen. This one here, the way it's mounted, it's actually pulling in this direction when the engine rocks back, but you can see that with that all tenderized and broken, it's not resisting as much motion as it should. So that's the other part of our equation today. Here's the replacement unit. And I do believe that this overmolding here is supposed to face down into the bracket, because that way it kind of just prevents it from rattling if it rocks side to side. So I need to get back in that direction. So we need to fish it back into. I almost wonder, it would be better going up through here. Oh, there we go. Perfect. It wasn't actually torqued super tight, so that's probably more than enough right there. We're into aluminum, remember? So there's where that mount lives. Okay, now we just put plastic clips back, and that requires tucking everything back the way it was. Some of these are just plastic into plastic, but a couple of them have a metal tab on the back, and so of course you need to make sure you go through all of them. And these ones that have a metal tab on the back also seem to use these longer style Honda clips rather than the short ones. If you want, they can also be separated, and sometimes that makes it easier to put this base piece back in the first time. So that one there has 3 layers, 2 layers of plastic, 1 layer of metal on the back. Base piece first that I've separated, and now done. These here are just plastic into plastic, so you can make sure I've got all 3 layers together correctly. And now I should be able to see the hole all the way through. That goes in there, and that, like that. Unfortunately, the way modern cars are put together is these plastic pieces all on the front end are actually kind of structural. Without them, the front end will flop around, and things that flop around eventually break off in the wind. So we have one here. Okay, hopefully you get the idea, and remember, you're probably going to break a few of these along the way. You can order bags of these in advance for a few bucks, or you can spend a few bucks for free at the auto parts store. So here's the short style Honda clips. Here's a longer style, and there's a couple other used on this vehicle. Newer Hondas may have different ones, but in any case, if you order a selection of these, or even get the giant multi-kit, it's available at Harbor Freight in a plastic case now, you can probably get more than enough varieties to put your vehicle back together. Okay, our fourth candidate in today's Destruction Derby is this one right down here. In order to take the weight off of it, I decided to go ahead and just put some support under there. I've got the jack underneath the oil pan, but you never put the jack directly on the oil pan if you can help it. I've used this piece of scrap lumber, and I've applied just a small amount of lift. To get better access to this, I've actually done this. This lifts off of here. You might have to fiddle with that clip a bit, and pushing this back just slightly gives you the room you need to work down here. And of course, it should be obvious while working down here, you want to be careful with the tools so you don't screw up any of the brake lines going in and out of your ABS control module here. All 3 of these bolts on this top bracket are 17s. There's actually 3 pieces going on here. There's a bracket off the front of the engine, there's this bracket across the top, and then the actual replaceable mount is this piece down here. This is a 17, at least it's supposed to be, but it intrudes up in the socket here, so this could be a little awkward, but if I can start untorquing it, the rest will take care of itself. Okay, it's wanting to round off. Well, what are my options? A longer socket or something else? Once more, into the breech. That might be enough. There we go. It's actually not on there that tight once you get that taken care of. Let's go to break this one while we're down here. And now the one on the center of the thing here. There we go. What the engine is now trying to do is settle back, so I'm going to put just a little more tension on the jack to lift it up a bit. That one's a nut, so I'll go ahead and remove it. Okay. At this step, you've got about 30 turns to regret everything and stop. If anything starts to shift or settle in an unexpected way, back up a step and reassess before moving forward. We're going to leave the grounds attached there, not move any of that. But that there, I'm not really expecting to have that much play in it. So I guess we are taking a trip to the auto parts store and seeing what we can do to replace that. Okay, back from the parts store. That's what the complete mount looks like. Gives you an idea how much of it's hiding down there. That has some kind of weird damping material in it. Can't move this one by hand very easily, I'd say that much. This one down here now needs to come out, and that's going to require removing 3 14s, and they're in a couple awkward spots. Okay, that's not so bad. They're not torqued to infinity. That one's already a little loose. And this one here, I'm actually going to have to work around the backside of the reservoir. And that one's tight. Can't quite reach that third one. I think that's loose enough now. I could just do this. Oh yeah. And now this should lift out of there like that. And, well, first off, whatever juice was in there is gone, so that's a problem. And then this here, I can kind of wiggle by hand, which I shouldn't be able to do either. And you can see it's starting to split out right there too. So interestingly, that whole mounting point is just kind of a cup that's welded up on top of the hard point there with some extra steel folds around the wheel well to reinforce it. Looking at the new one, this one obviously has some kind of damper fluid in there to help relieve vibrations, and I almost wonder if the fact that this is drained out might explain why when idling, you get some vibrations in there that are bad enough to shake the center console. So we'll see if those go away once this is all done. See if I can, there we go, see if I can hold that there and tighten this down. As soon as it drops down, then I have a problem again. Okay, now we try it. Okay, there we go. That's where it was before. So both of those are now centered roughly where they were before, and the mount's now in place, so I think we got the engine back in the right position. That feels pretty tight, and also, I don't want to rip that engine mount back out doing that. In fact, I already see some tension marks forming on the surface there, so hopefully that's where it needs to be. Jacking post. And this is like an 18 or 20 inch breaker bar, so we're putting a decent amount on this. That's not going very far. Last step is just to hang this back where it was. Job complete. I think Honda did actually have second thoughts about this design, because in 07, even though they kept some of the overall hardpoint suspension and drivetrain options when they made that major redesign, they changed how this front mount is laid out up there. So I'm guessing that they've realized that they had some long-term problems going on with this too. I think by having this one as a pin over here, the other three just moved too much. Okay. Let's just fire it up again, do the same test we were doing before, see how much it moves. Whatever it is this time, hopefully that represents normal. Well, however much motion that was, I hope it was the right amount, because we now have 4 replaced engine mounts and they should be functioning as a working system again. But that is as much as we can try and do and resolve that problem, so on to the next thing. Hey everyone, thanks for joining us again today. Hopefully you found that helpful. And next time on part 4, we're going to look at CV axles and see if we've got a problem there. So we'll see you again next time, whenever that is. Has anyone seen my phone?